here. This is the time for 571 where we will go over any questions that you may have for the assessment paper and talk about the final exam and any other things that, remaining questions that you may have. I have a few announcements. I have reviewed your interventions projects and they all look really good. So you can expect your grades back on those hopefully by Sunday, but next Tuesday at the very, very latest. But hopefully you'll have those back within the next week. And but as I said, they all look really good. I just need to finish completing all the rubrics for each one. So let's see if there's any other announcements. With regard to the final exam, I know that that may be a little bit different than some of you are used to. You may be used to more having quizzes, throughout the semester. So based on, as I mentioned in a previous email, I have decided to create a study guide for you all that I plan to have scheduled to be Friday, but it may, I have a graduate assistant helping me with that, and it may be a little later this weekend when I get that out, but definitely within the next week you can expect to receive that. What that study guide is going to do is to help you make sure that you're really capturing and understanding all of the main points and elements from each unit. It's going to be the vast majority of the questions are going to be coming directly from the readings, and I'll make sure that the readings are very clear, which ones, for each unit. So you'll have a list to make sure that that makes sense. If there are any questions that come from some of the supplementary material for a particular unit, because some of the units, I've just decided that the practice information is a little bit more relevant and important, like last week, than some of the readings that I had originally listed. So, but I'll make sure on the study guide that that is very, very clear to you. So it's not, because I know I post a lot of materials because you all are exiting the program and entering the professional field and are really already there with your internship. So I just wanted to make sure that you all had a lot of relevant resources for practicing with children and adolescents at your fingertips. So I know that a lot of that information can be kind of overwhelming and daunting. So in terms of the final exam, I will make sure that for each unit, it's very, very clear where all of those unit questions are going to be coming from. So I hope that that will be helpful to you all and relieve any potential anxiety you all may be feeling right before graduation. Also, just wanted to reiterate, I was extremely, extremely impressed with your policy projects. So congratulations and great work on those. I've really enjoyed reviewing those. I thought that they were absolutely fabulous. So good job on all of those. Let's see what else, if there's any other announcements. Before we get into the assessment paper, do you all, anybody who's with us, do you all have any questions? We'll just pause for a minute. No questions? Okay. All right, so moving on to the assessment paper, are there any, just right out of the gate, are there any questions about the assessment paper? No. Okay. Well, we can go ahead. Oops. I'm sharing my screen. So we will go ahead and go over, again, you've had the instructions for these for, the entire semester. And I imagine that in many of your other clinical concentration courses, you have done assessment papers of different ilks. So I expect that this is not entirely new for you, but hopefully it's just an opportunity for you to really focus on completing an assessment for someone who, again, is under the age of think I said 25. It says 21 here, but I made a note on the instructions that you just need to make sure if you do someone under the age of 25 that you do you make sure that the evidence-based practice that you're looking at in the treatment plan is specific to transition age youth and is not an adult-oriented practice. Okay, so essentially you're picking a movie. I did receive a lot of questions that I tried to answer on the last Blackboard announcement. And the key thing here is to treat the character that you pick in the movie, even though some of them, like in the Hunger Games, are extremely far-fetched. But the whole point is that you're treating this character as your client. So in the introduction, you need to set up the context in which you are interacting with this person. So I understand. So some people may choose to, interact with the client essentially at the timeline that's at the very end of the movie. So as the movie concludes, that's the context in which you first interact with the client and complete the assessment. Or and if that's the case, you just need to make sure that that's clear in the introduction. You also need to make sure it's clear, at what point, if it's in the beginning of the movie or halfway through, and all of that kind of stuff, just so I as your reader, as your audience, really understand where you're coming from on that. Some other points about that is, as I again mentioned on the announcement, is make sure that the setting is clear and that it's realistic, just as you would in real life. So I mentioned, in Winter's Bone, that's a very rural, kind of mountainous area that she is in, and so and she has no car, no transportation. So the idea that she would actually come into a clinic for an assessment is very unrealistic. So most likely you'd want to do a home visit, and especially, perhaps have some interactions or contact with her other family members. So just make sure that it all sort of flows and is logical, and it makes as much sense as possible. I really don't want you just making up details about the character, just as you would not make up details about your own client. You would need to verify that with background information that you would receive on a referral form or a case file, and through your one-on-one interviews with that client. So definitely do not be making up any details, but you can essentially sort of set the tone for the context that you have the interaction. Let's see. What did I want to mention about this? As a general rule, I'm going to pull up the rubric. So one of the critical things for doing an assessment is that you really want when I review these as your audience, and the practice that I hope that you all get in applying all of this information in this assignment, is that your critical thinking is on full display in every aspect of this. You're supporting your points with evidence from the film. So if you talk about relevant biological information, you need to be saying, exactly what that was and where that information came from. So your citations need to be present. Just because it's an assessment does not mean that you do not need to cite. In fact, you have in the instructions, there's a note about the required number of references that you need to use in this assignment. So it's just, classic kind of case formulation process that you will need to use. Also, in the introduction, you're, under the, this first kind of overview part, you have your client identifying information and your main presenting problem. This really sets the tone for the entire assessment, for everything that follows. So the biopsychosocial piece, that's your really person and environment. That's your 360 view of what's going on with that person, so that you can help understand what some of the strengths and other problems that are around that can either help your client or potentially provide some challenges or barriers or obstacles to your client meeting their ultimate treatment goals. So everything should really follow very seamlessly. It should be a very logical process, and you really should have a essentially a thread that follows throughout. And I want to caution you, just from some lessons learned with past students for this assignment, is sometimes, and I mentioned this in the assessment, you'll talk about the presenting problem, you'll give me the whole context here under the biopsychosocial, then do a great job of talking about strengths and problems, the rationale or the hypothesis behind the underlying issues driving the client's difficulties or symptoms, and initial identification of possible intervention needs. And then we'll come to the client goals and treatment plan, which is critical. And then all of a sudden it'll be new information, or it'll be a new goal that or treatment recommendation that's not in any way connected to either the main presenting problem, the relevant biopsychosocial information, or anything that was mentioned in the case formulation. So that is just definitely, if you find yourself going there, please pause and take a step back and think critically about, does that make sense? And maybe it's just an issue of writing, and you get to the end and you've got some great treatment goals, and maybe through that process it inspires you to go back and make sure that you add some additional information here so that all of those dots are connected. So that's one of the things in terms of just reviewing and grading I will be looking for, that it really just all flows and makes sense. Hopefully that will, and I really don't anticipate that will be an issue for any of you, but just wanted to highlight as a potential pitfall moving forward. A note about the DSM diagnosis: you are not expected to make an actual DSM diagnosis. However, you can. If there's a diagnosis that's mentioned in the film, you can talk about that. Or you can talk about your hypothesis about symptoms that are consistent with a possible DSM diagnosis, which obviously can inform your treatment planning. But just make sure that you really are, again, thinking critically about that, and you're supporting it with evidence. So if you hypothesize that these symptoms are consistent with the DSM diagnosis, then you need to make sure that you're telling me exactly, which symptoms are present, and how those dots connect, vis-a-vis the criteria for a DSM diagnosis. So that should be pretty clear, but again, it's not required. It's not an expectation. Either way, I just want to caution you. It's, some people definitely put that in, and that's totally fine. Just make sure that you're really including all the relevant information there. So a note about your SMART goals: at least one of your initial treatment recommendations for your client should be based in research on empirically supported interventions specifically for the issues the client is facing. So one of the things that I'm going to be looking for here is, what is your evidence base? So that will be one of the sources, the required sources that you'll need to mention. And it's, let's see. So you'll want to just mention that you need to make sure that it's a culturally relevant and appropriate and age appropriate recommendation for your client. So just want to make sure that you're thinking through all those things, and that you're actually explaining your rationale and why that particular intervention makes sense for your client's particular treatment goals. I have a lot of tips around just writing SMART goals. This is your last semester before you graduate, I think, for either all of you or most of you. So please, if you have not yet mastered how to write a SMART goal, please take this aspect of the assignment very seriously and use it as an opportunity for you to really hone in and just learn this, because it's it's most likely never going to go away. That's why you have so many different opportunities across all your classes to write SMART goals. So if you can really hone in and take the time to do this really well, it will greatly inform your the efficacy of your practice out in the field. So please, take this part and this opportunity seriously. There's a lot of, as I mentioned in the writing resources, and under just resources for this assignment, there's tip sheets. There's 2 different tip sheets on writing SMART goals. I thought that they were really straightforward and helpful. If you get into writing these and you really are just not, you're still struggling with them, and you're just really not sure if you're hitting the mark, please feel free to, at any point before the deadline on the 21st, email me. Just shoot me an email and say, hey, would you mind just reviewing this one example and let me know if I'm, hitting the target with this. I'd be happy to help you kind of midstream if you really feel like you're struggling. There are some tips about the differences between the goals and the, treatment recommendations. So all of those are outlined, but one of the critical things, and I feel like I've said this in several different ways across the different, in the instructions, but sometimes students have incorporated into their goals or their treatment recommendations that they will refer out for, so kind of goal 1 or something, they will make a referral to another provider for, this, that, and the other, or something like that. And that's just really not an appropriate treatment recommendation or treatment goal, because it may be a step that you need to do in support of the treatment recommendation, but it's not a client goal for you to make a phone call. So you really want to write these 3 goals as really outcomes. So think about it as, what is the behavior change that you are expecting your client to make? And that behavior change goal has to really tie back to the presenting problem and the strengths and challenges outlined in your case formulation. It should all, as I mentioned, be a seamless, very logical process. So hopefully that won't be, y'all will, get these and everything will flow really well. But in the past, that has been an issue. And again, as I said, services are not goals. So attending parenting classes is not a goal. It may be a step. It may be a really helpful objective to attend, 3 parenting classes per month for the next 3 months, or something like that. And, a particular curriculum, even that, like nurturing parenting or something that you would want to use. But the service itself is not the goal, because that attending a class is not a behavior change. It's a step toward a behavior change. So you want to think about, what is the ultimate outcome, the desired goal that the person would get through attending those parenting classes. So I'm going to stop there for just a minute and see if there's any questions that you all have about SMART goals, the rubric in general, the instructions, kind of setting the context, case formulation, diagnosis. All right, I'm not hearing any questions. The rest of this is pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure, of course, as always, it's APA format, section headings. Please use these. It's extremely helpful. It will also be helpful to you to make sure that you're not, missing any of these. So, all your headings are essentially outlined here. So, these parts are your overview. And, so this will be another subheading, and then this is your header, and then, biological information, psychological information. These are all your subheadings. And same thing with case formulation is a heading, and then you've got your other subheadings under here. So that should be really clear. It helps me review, it helps me grade it, it helps me know that you've answered any question. As I tell all my foundation students, don't make me wonder if you've answered the question or not. Make it very, very clear through your formatting, and especially in APA format, that you've hit all the required components. All right. Well, that is essentially all I wanted to make sure that we just mentioned and y'all had time to ask about the okay, there was a question about, are we writing goals or do we need to provide objectives as well? You can do this, like if you look on the exemplar, they were able to write a very good SMART goal just in, kind of paragraph format and just a goal. That's totally fine. You can also write goals and objectives as long as it makes sense. And what I will do is I will look for the SMART format within the entire context of that one goal and those objectives. So it really will depend on what you choose as your particular goal. Some goals are easier to write in just, like I said in the exemplar, it's just a paragraph. You can just, get the whole goal there, or hit all the SMART, SMART requirements or criteria. But some people find it a lot easier to have a broader goal, which again is a goal is broader. It's focused on outcome, it's focused on behavior change. But then through the objectives, which are much narrower, you can hit all of those, specific time-bound, relevant issues. So you have an option. There's not a requirement either way. Just the requirement regardless is that you meet the SMART criteria. Okay. All right. Let's see. I think that's it. I did also want to mention with regard to, let's stop sharing. With regard to the readings, there are 2 more units of readings that need to be posted. And just for your own planning purposes, I will be posting those as soon as possible within the next few days. Hopefully we'll get all those done even tomorrow for both units. And I'm not going to post more than 3 articles per unit. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 5 listed. So for planning purposes, just know there won't be more than 3 for each unit. And there is already a lot of information under the special populations. Basically that whole unit, all the information is posted. I just need to post the readings. And so there's a lecture in there on adolescent sexuality that I highly recommend that you look at. It's an absolutely tremendous opportunity from a guest lecture I had in the fall. So I really hope that you get a lot out of the next 2 units, and I look forward to reading your assessment papers and finalizing and wrapping up the semester with all of you. Again, I've been really, really impressed with the quality of your work, and look forward to answering any questions that you may have for the rest of the semester. And that concludes what I wanted to make sure we covered on this session. So are there any remaining questions or concerns about anything we need to discuss? All right. Well, feel free to email me at any time and let me know if you do have any other questions, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I hope you all have an excellent rest of the semester. And if you are graduating in May and walking and you are in Nashville, or you want to travel to Nashville for the graduation, I look forward to meeting you all in person. All right. Good night.